December 17th, 1944, 0530 hours, Honsfeld, Belgium. The Tiger tank's engine coughed, sputtered, and then stopped completely. SS Obersturmbannführer Joachim Peiper slammed his fist against the turret hatch, the sharp metal clang ringing out in the early morning darkness. His driver, Untersturmführer Werner, tried to restart the 700 horsepower Maybach engine, but nothing happened. The fuel gauge showed empty. Hauptsturmführer Werner called up from his spot, his voice full of barely hidden panic. The reserve tank is dry too. Peiper climbed down from his command tank, his boots crunching on the frozen Belgian ground. Around him, the strongest armored attack force the Wehrmacht had put together for Operation Wacht am Rhein, the Ardennes Offensive, sat still and silent. There were 67 tanks, 149 half-tracks, and nearly 5,000 of Germany's best Waffen-SS soldiers, all stopped because of empty fuel tanks. Through the morning fog, Peiper could see the empty American position ahead in Honsfeld, a key supply depot for the U.S. 99th Infantry Division. The Americans had left in such a hurry that fires were still burning in oil drums, coffee was still hot in metal cups, and there, lined up like a gift from the gods of war, were rows and rows of jerry cans, thousands of them, the typical olive green American fuel containers. Peiper walked up slowly, almost with respect. His adjutant, Hauptsturmführer Hans Gruller, pried open one can and sniffed. Benzene, high-octane gasoline. As his men started the urgent job of refueling their vehicles, Peiper walked through the stockpile, counting. The numbers were huge, 50,000 gallons, enough to fuel his whole Kampfgruppe for the push to the Meuse River, enough to maybe change the whole offensive. The Americans had left behind more fuel in this one depot than most German divisions had gotten in the last 6 months. But as Peiper stood there, among all that fuel, watching his men pour American gasoline into German tanks, a heavy realization hit him like the morning mist. If the Americans could just leave behind such huge amounts, if they could abandon what Germany would protect with whole divisions, then the war was already lost. Germany hadn't just made a mistake. They had totally misunderstood their enemy. 6 months before Peiper's find at Honsfeld, in June 1944, Albert Speer, Hitler's Minister of Armaments and War Production, had given the Führer a report that should have stopped all offensive plans right away. Germany's synthetic fuel production, the key to the Wehrmacht's survival, had been wrecked by Allied bombing. The Luna Works, which made 175,000 tons of fuel in April, only produced 5,000 tons by September. The big hydrogenation plants at Politz, Bleckhammer, and Brooks were running at less than 10% capacity. The numbers showed certain defeat. In 1944, the United States produced 1.8 billion barrels of crude oil, while Germany, with all its synthetic fuel and captured Romanian fields, only managed 33 million barrels, less than 2% of what America made. The Third Reich was trying to fight a mechanized war with horse-drawn supply lines, while America was flooding its armies with plenty of petroleum. Major Friedrich Zimmermann of the Wehrmacht's Logistics Command had figured out that the Ardennes Offensive would need 4.5 million gallons of fuel to reach Antwerp. Hitler gave 5 million gallons, but only half actually got delivered because of transport issues. The German leaders were gambling the whole offensive on capturing enemy supplies, a plan that showed deadly weakness instead of strength. Meanwhile, The Americans had built a fuel pipeline system across France called Pluto, pipeline under the ocean, and the Red Ball Express, a huge truck convoy that brought 12,500 tons of supplies to the front every day. By December 1944, American forces in Europe were using 1.2 million gallons of fuel per day, but getting 1.4 million gallons. They were building up extra while still fighting. Joachim Peiper was no fool. At 29, he was one of the youngest regimental commanders in the Waffen SS, holder of the Knight's Cross, with oak leaves and swords, a veteran of the Eastern Front, where he learned that in modern war, fuel was more important than bullets. His Kampfgruppe had been picked as the main attack point for the whole Ardennes Offensive. On December 14th, 2 days before it started, Peiper went to the final briefing at Tondorf. General Sepp Dietrich, leading the 6th SS Panzer Army, was direct. You will have enough fuel to reach the Meuse if you capture American supplies. The fuel given to Kampfgruppe Peiper was 31,000 gallons, enough for 50 miles of fighting. The distance to the Meuse was 65 miles. The plan was built to fail from the start. As his column got ready to move on December 16th, Peiper gave strict orders. Tanks would go in single file to save fuel. Engines would be turned off for any stop longer than 5 minutes, and capturing American fuel dumps was the top goal, even over battle targets. The difference from American ways couldn't be bigger. That same morning, Captain James Ross of the U.S. 743rd Tank Battalion, just 20 miles from Peiper's start, wrote in his unit log, "Received fuel resupply 8,000 gallons. Third delivery this week. Storage tanks already full. December 16th, 1944, 5:30 hours. The German artillery that kicked off Operation Wacht am Rhein used more shells in 2 hours than the Wehrmacht had planned for whole operations earlier in the war. But even this big show hid serious shortages. Peiper's column started at 7 a.m. Already late, the roads, shown as highways on German maps, were narrow country paths, many not paved. Soon, traffic jams built up as vehicles made for the Russian steppes struggled in the Ardennes woods. At Lanzerath, Peiper's first target, they hit surprise resistance from one American intelligence and reconnaissance platoon, 18 men who held back the strongest German armored force for almost 10 hours. During the wait, Peiper's vehicles sat running, using up valuable fuel. When they finally pushed through and reached Honsfeld at dawn on December 17th, Peiper's group had gone 20 miles and used 40% of their fuel. At this pace, they would run out before the halfway point to the Meuse. The American supply depot at Honsfeld wasn't even a main one. It was a forward point for the 99th Infantry Division, what the U.S. Army called a Class 3B depot, a short-term fuel stop. But what Peiper found there was more than a whole German panzer division got in a month. Hauptmann Hans Gruller later said, "We found piles of jerry cans, each with 5 gallons of gasoline, stacked 3 meters high over maybe 200 meters. The Americans didn't even try to blow them up. The captured fuel was high-octane aviation gas mixed with motor fuel, 80 octane or higher. German vehicles, especially the picky Maybach engines in Tiger tanks, were made for 74 octane fuel. The American gas was actually too good, causing issues in some German engines. As Peiper's men refueled, they found more. Sergeant Wilhelm Hoffmann found shipping papers in the depot office. He could read English from working in his father's import business before the war. The papers showed this fuel came from Texas to New York, across the Atlantic to Liverpool, over the Channel to Normandy, and trucked 400 miles to Honsfeld. The trip of over 6,000 miles took less than 6 weeks. I showed the papers to Obersturmbannführer Peiper. Hoffmann recalled in a 1976 interview. He read them twice, then crumpled them. He said nothing, but his face turned pale. We both knew what it meant. Private Ernst Kara found a stack of Stars and Stripes newspapers from December 15th, just 2 days old. The headline cheered a new fuel pipeline from Cherbourg to Verdun that could deliver 300,000 gallons a day. A single pipeline giving more fuel daily than Kampfgruppe Peiper would use in the whole offensive. To understand the shock of Peiper's find, you have to know Germany's fuel crisis by late 1944. Since May, Allied bombs had cut synthetic fuel production by 90%. The Luftwaffe was grounding planes for lack of aviation fuel. Pilot training dropped from 250 hours to 60. The German Navy's big ships had stopped sailing. U-boats got snorkels to save diesel by using batteries more. At home, German people hadn't seen private cars since 1942. Gasoline was so rare, the Gestapo checked thefts of single liters. Farmers went back to horse plows. Meanwhile, the U.S. made 67% of the world's oil. The East Texas field alone produced more than all of German-held Europe. American refineries were so busy that Standard Oil tried new products just because they had extra crude. With the 50,000 gallons from Honsfeld, Peiper's column pushed ahead fast. They reached Bullingen by noon on December 17th, taking more supplies, food, ammo, and best of all, maps showing other American fuel depots nearby. But the maps showed a scary truth. The Americans had fuel stockpiles everywhere. Every big crossroads had a depot. The U.S. First Army alone had 3.5 million gallons in reserve. Peiper kept going to Ligneville, where his forces did the Malmedy massacre, killing 84 American prisoners. Even this crime tied to fuel desperation. As Peiper later said, he couldn't spare gas to move prisoners. By evening on December 17th, Peiper's lead reached Stavolo, home to a big American fuel depot with over 2 million gallons. Enough to reach the Meuse for sure. But as the first German vehicles got close, American engineers were already working. Captain John Brewster of the 291st Engineer Combat Battalion got warning of the Germans coming. His orders were clear: deny fuel to the enemy no matter what. The Stavolo depot had 2,189,000 gallons in jerry cans, over 15 acres. At 16:30 on December 17th, as Peiper's scouts approached, Brewster ordered it. Engineers poured gas trails between stacks, handed out white phosphorus grenades. Technical Sergeant Paul Solis threw the first one. The blast was huge and instant, he recalled. A wall of fire shot up maybe 100 feet. In minutes, the whole depot was a firestorm. Peiper's tanks arrived to see a black smoke pillar 1,000 feet high. The fire burned 3 days, destroying enough fuel to power Peiper's division to Antwerp and back. Untersturmführer Werner described it. The Obersturmbannführer stood on his tank watching the flames. He said nothing for maybe 5 minutes, then climbed down and told me they can afford to burn 2 million gallons to keep them from us. What are we doing here? Across the Ardennes, American engineers burned fuel dumps to avoid capture. At 1.1 million gallons. At Spa, 2.5 million. In total, Americans burned over 8 million gallons in the first week, more than Germany planned for the whole operation. The power to just burn millions of gallons came from a supply system the Germans couldn't imagine. The Red Ball Express delivered 412,000 tons of supplies with 6,000 trucks running nonstop. Each truck used 40 gallons a day, so the system itself burned more fuel than German Army Group B got monthly. By December 1944, the Motor Transport Service had 230 truck companies on color-coded routes, delivering 20,000 tons daily, including 3,000 tons of fuel. Colonel James Snyder, Chief Logistics Officer for 1st Army, noted on December 18th, "Fuel received yesterday, 1,847,000 gallons, issued 1,623,000 gallons, net gain to reserves 224,000 gallons. The pipeline system was even better. Operation Pluto laid pipes across the English Channel, pumping 1 million gallons a day from Britain with inland networks like the Cherbourg-Perry line at 800,000 gallons daily and the Seine line at 650,000. By December 1944, Allied forces in Northwest Europe used 7.5 million gallons a day, but got 8.2 million. They built reserves during attacks. As Peiper went deeper into Belgium on December 18th, the hopeless German spot became clear. At Schoppen, they took another depot, 5,000 gallons, used up in 3 hours of fighting. Tiger tanks burned 2.5 gallons per mile in battle, Panthers 1.5, and in the tough Ardennes land, it rose 40%. Hauptmann Otto Dingler, maintenance officer for the 1st SS Panzer Regiment, noted, "By noon December 18th, we used 67,000 gallons since the start, captured maybe 55,000. We were losing ground. The Americans, listening to German radio via ultra intercepts, knew Peiper's fuel trouble. General Courtney Hodges ordered all units, enemy very short on fuel, destroy all gas stocks at risk of capture." That day, American C-47s flew 316 trips to Bastogne with supplies, including 160,000 gallons of fuel, flying more to a trapped group than Peiper's whole Kampfgruppe had. By December 19th, as Peiper's forces fought at Stoumont, the fuel crisis was deadly. Tanks abandoned empty, not damaged. Peiper gathered his last fuel, maybe 8,000 gallons, enough for one fight or retreat, not both. Meanwhile, Allied planners asked for 245 million gallons for January, approved without debate. The gap went beyond amounts. American vehicles were standard for efficiency. Shermans used 0.8 gallons per mile versus Tiger's 2.5. Trucks got 8 miles per gallon loaded. Parts swapped easy. Germans had a mess of captured and made vehicles with different needs. French tanks needed special oil. Soviet trucks different parts than German Opels. Each issue making logistics harder. On December 20th, Peiper got a radio message. Fuel convoy hit by Allied planes. No resupply. Keep going with what you have. Peiper met his commanders. Sturmbannführer Werner Pötschke was direct. "We have fuel for maybe 20 kilometers. The Meuse is 30 kilometers away." From Gruler's testimony, the Obersturmbannführer said, "Gentlemen, we are fighting an enemy who burns more fuel to deny it to us than we got for this whole operation. What we took at Honsfeld, which seemed like a miracle, was nothing to them. We cannot win." This understanding spread fast. General Hasso von Manteuffel, leading 5th Panzer Army, later wrote, "When I heard Americans burned 8 million gallons to avoid our capture, I knew the offensive failed before starting." Colonel Friedrich von der Heydte, captured December 23rd, told questioners, "Your soldiers throw away chocolate. My men haven't seen it in 2 years. You burn millions of gallons. We measure by the liter. How can we fight such plenty?" By December 21st, Peiper was trapped at La Gleize. His tanks stuck. The American forces around him, the 31st Infantry, 82nd Airborne, 3rd Armored, had 340,000 gallons just for December 21st. Peiper had maybe 1,000. Private First Class Richard McKinney wrote home, "We've got Germans surrounded who ran out of gas. Our captain jokes, we use more fuel for coffee than they have for tanks." The American fight showed industrial war at its best. Patton's Third Army turned north, needed 350,000 gallons just to move. Impossible for Germans, but done in 3 days. December 23rd brought clear skies. Allied planes flew 2,000 sorties, each using fuel that would ground the Luftwaffe for weeks. P-47s burned 300 gallons per hour, B-26s 200. One day's air ops used more than Germany's whole offensive plan. On the night of December 23rd to 24th, Peiper left his vehicles and escaped on foot. Of 119 tanks and assault guns at the start, 39 were working but stuck, destroyed with last ammo. Oberleutnant Heinz Goltz described, "We drained the last fuel from all vehicles, maybe 200 gallons total." The Obersturmbannführer destroyed his own command tank. Millions of Reichsmarks in gear, wrecked by empty tanks. Of 5,000 men who started with Kampfgruppe Peiper, about 770 came back. They went 60 miles, took some depots, and learned the truth about Allied supplies. News of Peiper's finds spread quick through German leaders. On December 26th, Field Marshal Walter Model got reports on captured American stuff. His chief of staff noted Model's reaction. The Field Marshal read the amounts twice. 50,000 gallons at Honsfeld, 2 million burned at Stavolo, 8 million destroyed rather than taken. He said, "We are not fighting the same war." Hitler, told on December 28th, wouldn't believe it. Speer wrote, Hitler said the numbers were lies, claimed photos of burning Stavolo were Hollywood tricks, but lower ranks knew. Gefreiter Wilhelm Hoffmann wrote his wife, "Americans destroy more fuel daily than we get monthly. They drive tanks like we walk. This war is lost." The fuel crisis showed a bigger truth. By 1944, America made 50% of world goods. A new plane every 5 minutes, a ship a day, a tank every 7. Oil stats were crushing. US 1.8 billion barrels, Soviets 110 million, Germany 33 million, Japan 2.6 million. The Axis together, less than 2% of US oil. Every big German attack after 1942 was limited by fuel. Every American one, backed by plenty, Germans couldn't dream of. Lieutenant Colonel Chester Hansen noted a telling event on December 27th. Supply officer said weather cut fuel deliveries to only 500,000 gallons a day. Worry until someone pointed out that beat Germany's whole offensive amount. German prisoners from the Ardennes were shocked more by American waste than guns. Seeing GIs toss half-eaten food or use gas for heat broke morale more than shells. Oberstleutnant Helmuth Reichhelm told questioners, "We knew your production numbers on paper, but seeing soldiers waste more than we had made it real. Every German who saw your easy plenty knew the war was hopeless." This knowledge spread in letters despite checks. Feldwebel Ernst Müller wrote, "Americans wash clothes in gasoline, feed chocolate to dogs, fire artillery for Christmas. We cannot fight infinity." The mind impact broke German race superiority stories. How could weak Americans have such wealth while the master race scraped for basics? At Nuremberg, German leaders always said logistics, especially fuel, decided it. Field Marshal Keitel testified, "We had better operations 1940-41. By 1944, we couldn't move for no fuel, while Americans shifted armies like chess." Peiper, tried for Malmedy, gave key words, "every choice." After December 17th was from fuel lack. We couldn't move, chase, or pull back well. Americans went free while we counted leaders. General Heinz Guderian wrote, "When Peiper took 50,000 gallons, everything to him, but nothing to Americans. The war ended. The story matters, because it shows when industrial war hit its end. Wars won by factory stats, not brave soldiers. The dream of war died in the Ardennes, among empty tanks." Dr. Richard Overy figured by 1944, Allied to Axis make ratios over 5.1 in big items. In oil near 51 FAS, these edges couldn't be beat by better training or plans. America made 320,750 planes in the war. Germany 119,307. Americans built 88,410 tanks. Germany 46,857. But most clear, America refined 1.8 billion barrels. In 1944, Germany scraped 33 million. December 24th, 1944, as Peiper's men snuck through American lines on foot, leaving 39 tanks, 70 half-tracks, 177 other vehicles. It all clicked. They took 50,000 gallons like a miracle, only to learn it meant nothing to an enemy who burned millions. Untersturmführer Werner reflected in 1975. That morning at Honsfeld, finding American fuel, we cheered like lottery winners. By evening, hearing of Stavolo burning, we knew we'd lost. Americans had so much they could wreck what we'd die for. The 50,000 gallons was less than one American armored division used in 2 days, less than Red Ball Express burned in 3 hours, a tiny bit in Allied daily use. Major General J. Lawton Collins later wrote, "Germans' desperate grabs for fuel showed their error. They thought we valued fuel like them. As priceless, they couldn't grasp we had so much. We burned millions over small risks." Operation Wacht am Rhein failed from hard math of industrial war. The attack used about 2.8 million gallons, 40% of their plan, the rest from captures. In the same time, Americans used 267 million gallons, nearly 100 times more. The Wehrmacht lost 100,000 men, 800 tanks, 1,000 planes. But worst was losing hope. Every German seeing American plenty knew Germany wasn't warring, but dying. Joachim Peiper lived, jailed till 1956 for war crimes. On July 14th, 1976, killed at his French home by unknowns. But in 1967, he told historian Henry Liddell, "Finding that depot was worst. If we'd run out sooner, maybe retreat with pride. Instead, we learned Americans had oceans while we had drops. We saw the impossible. The lesson goes past Bulge too. In industrial war, supplies beat tactics, making beats bravery. Plenty wins over will. The German soldier of 1944 was likely better trained, more battle-hard. It didn't help. Americans had a factory machine that wasted more than Germany made. This truth was in every jerry can at Honsfeld, every gallon burned at Stavolo, every pipeline across France. Wars between factory powers would be won by plants and oil works, not smart leaders. Colonel Trevor Dupuy figured in December 1944, each American soldier got 67 pounds of supplies daily, each German 3 pounds. Americans griped about waste. Germans saw American waste as dream plenty. In 1984, 40 years later, veterans met at Gleize. The museum shows Peiper's Tiger tank stuck where it ran dry, December 23, 1944. Former Unteroffizier Karl Wortmann stood by it with former Staff Sergeant Roy Anderson of the 30th Infantry. "We always wondered why you stopped," Anderson said. "We thought tactics." Wortmann laughed sadly. "We stopped because tanks empty. You burned millions to keep from us. How fight that?" Anderson quiet then. "We never knew you that short. We had so much we never thought." That talk caught December 1944's truth. One side counted gallons, other millions. One fought for each can, other burned seas. The end was set. German logs prove it. Army Group B's War Diary. December 1944. December 16th. Offensive starts. Fuel 70% of minimum. December 17th. Peiper takes 50,000 gallons. December 18th. Depots burned. 5+ million lost. December 19th. Fuel critical. Units stuck. December 24th. Peiper leaves vehicles. Fuel gone. Meanwhile, 1st Army logs. December 16th. Reserves 3.7 million gallons. December 17th. 2.2 million destroyed. December 18th. 1.8 million received. December 24th. Reserves 4.1 million. Americans handled millions like nothing. Germans treasured single cans. Beyond amounts, American fuel showed tech edge. U.S. refineries mastered catalytic cracking, making higher octane better than German ways. American 100-octane plane fuel gave speed over German 87-octane synthetic. Americans had additives Germany couldn't match, like tetraethylene, ethylene, dibromide. Detergents, German engines, built for low quality, often failed on captured U.S. gas. Fuel lack shaped every soldier's life. Gefreiter Hans Müller noted December 20th, marched 30 km. No fuel for trucks. Passed abandoned U.S. vehicles with engines on for heat. They leave running. We walk snow. Medical help crippled. Ambulances couldn't move wounded. Hospitals no generators. Men died waiting for rides that never came. Oberarzt Dr. Wilhelm Kersting said, "We had great surgeons, supplies from Americans, but no fuel for ambulances. Men died who could save with 10-kilometer trip." The fines broke German lies about American weakness. Soldiers told Americans soft, unable, then saw them destroy more than Germany had. Goebbels' diary, December 28th. Reports show morale issues. Soldiers write of U.S. edge, hurting our story. But tales spread faster than blocks. The myth of German best couldn't last against U.S. supplies. The Ardennes flop left Germany no choices but desperate hold. General Alfred Jodl at Nuremberg. After Ardennes, we knew lost. We played last card. Found enemy, all aces. Seeing German desperation, Allies hit fuel making. By February 1945, German fuel stopped. Luftwaffe grounded, training off. Wehrmacht fixed, wrecked bit by moving foes. Spring 1945 had weird scenes. German units gave up from no move, not loss. Whole panzer groups sat helpless as Allies passed. General Major Fritz Bayerlein described, "We had 42 working tanks, good crews ammo. We had 300 liters fuel, not enough for next town. We wrecked tanks, walked to capture. Meanwhile, U.S. push limited only by vehicle jams from too many. Third Army had 15,000 vehicles alone." Kampfgruppe, Peiper's fuel mess, shows how factory power set Stavolo to his end. When Peiper stood amid